And we are live. Hello, creatives, community, kind folks, and I guess I have to say college students out there. I am DBJ. This is RPG with DBJ, and we're doing something a little different here. There may be some fits and starts because we are live on YouTube for audio and video, and we are also simulcasting to Fantasy Grounds College in the audio section. So if you have joined the Discord, or you are thinking about just listening to the show and just having an audio version, I highly suggest that you go over to Fantasy Grounds College. That information is below in the video, and join the Discord. And very easy to find me. Just go over to Fantasy Grounds and use the slider and find RPG with DBJ for voice. So yes, we are doing this now. If you have any questions, as usual on YouTube, you can just go into the chat, type in a question or a comment or something about our today's subject. You can do the same thing over at Fantasy Grounds College Discord channel. Just please, because there are a number of individuals and you want to be highlighted, please put hashtag DBJ in the beginning of your comment. Yeah, we have someone in both chats who's saying that there's about a 5-second delay getting the audio. Okay, all right. So yeah, I hope that's not throwing you. I was going to say, hope it's not throwing you off. You might want to mute one of those and just pick one. But of course, like myself, I'm sure some of you out there, Tesla Ranger and Rickard and others might be juggling it back and forth just to find out which one's better for them. But this is just another option. And of course, I want to bring what I do to Fantasy Grounds College. So let's get a little bit more specific about what I'm doing and then get back into the subject that we have for all week. So I'm partnering with Fantasy Grounds College. I am very thankful that someone who is a administrator over at Fantasy Grounds College, Fat Ninja DM, thank you very much, is one of the individuals that's helping me bring what I do into the Fantasy Grounds College atmosphere. What they do over there in terms of teaching people how to use the virtual tabletop Fantasy Grounds. And so, yeah, I'm a noob. I'm brand new. I know nothing about it. And so my journey in learning how to use it and what I do here, I'm going to bring to them. And then the individuals over there, the people who are learning to use Fantasy Grounds and part of that vast community, hopefully they can gain something for what I do here. And that's it. Now, okay, so let's get into the specifics of what we were talking about this week, and I hope they can gain something from it. So this week we're talking about subterranean adventures and the Underdark, which strangely enough are kind of two different things, but we're going to get into that as well. So on this Discord Tuesday, we're just going to talk very generally about it and about adventures in the Underdark, adventures in subterranean realms, and continue our discussion all week. For Discord members of the Fantasy Grounds College, every day we have a different theme against the subject that's all week. So this entire week we're talking about subterranean adventures, and each day is something different. Monster Monday. Today will be Discord Tuesdays, World Building Wednesday, Third Pillar Thursday, the third pillar of exploration, and then of course Future Friday. So let's get on into it. Thanks, Scott. Scott says they're lucky to have you. Well, I'm lucky to be here. Now, I just want to make sure that we are. Are there any comments? Thank you. All right. So yesterday we talked about, on Monster Monday, we talked about the types of creatures that we can use, or rather, more specifically, the way creatures and sentient or otherwise, animal or otherwise, are able to navigate their way into the subterranean realms. Rick, you're silly. Yeah, he says, I'm guessing Fantasy Grounds College will be even better for Underdark, given the built-in line of sight. Which line of sight and visual mechanism, I think would be excellent for like the subterranean, the horror elements of it, especially when you don't know what's around the corner. Oh, Fantasy Ground Unity. He's talking about Fantasy Ground. Sorry, the programming, not the community. The idea that I think sometimes it comes across to us that when diving down into the subterranean realms, that our three-dimensional brain sometimes is not activated quite a bit. And I'm sure this comes about from practical reasons, right? If you're an old head like me, I remember looking at maps of dungeons, and it was always written on like that blue line graph paper, the really tiny squares, long before you had the 1-inch squares for miniatures and things. And of course, on graph paper, it was always a flat plane. And sure, you had a few maps that kind of showed you the breakaway from the side, and you could see some of the elevation elements of it. But still, these were hand-formed dungeons, a couple of steps here and there, maybe a pit trap here and there, but it was usually flat. But if you really take a look at raw caverns, if you've ever been spelunking, you'll know that there are very few flat surfaces and very few locations where you have a wide open range to see things. There's lots of obstructions. The light that you're casting casts these harsh shadows, and it can be a little disconcerting, almost claustrophobic for people who are not used to going into stable caves, like someone like myself. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Scott Post saying the blue line maps couldn't be photocopied back then. Yeah, and that was one of the reasons. I mean, graph paper came in blue, but it was also a way to say, yeah, don't steal this, because if you try to photocopy it, it would just gray out and be completely blank. But in for our purposes, again, me, I love to talk about reskinning and reflavoring things. There's no telling what kind of obstacles and pathways and things that we can use in our own settings. Talked about stalactites and stalagmites and raw rock, and even other forms of granularity when it comes to the earth itself, whether it's sandy or muddy or boulder strewn and whatnot. And then even the type of rock. Are there striations in a rock and they break off like trying to describe, almost as if it was like a blade slicing through a slice of cake, right? Where the rock shears itself like shale or slate, or it could be something far more granular, where it starts to break apart in your hands and such. And then kind of have fun with that. Maybe there's a threat of a cave-in, or there are piles of stone and rock around you can use for obstacles and such. So now translating that into, say, like a virtual tabletop, or at your own table if you have miniatures and whatnot, it may take a little bit of a little something used to get your brain to get used to having those things in that element. But I still think that there's a possibility of having some fun with it, whether you're using, you get some old miniatures and you melt them down and paint them brown or something. Although maybe that might not look like dirt. But yes, you could very much find obstacles and things for your way. And obstacles do not necessarily need to be something that's on the ground as well. If they're over your head, characters have to duck or crawl or watch out for bumping their heads or stoop their shoulders and make these locations like tight spaces, or in times when they need to crawl on their belly, or maybe it's a vertical passageway where they need to stand up straight and kind of slip side by side and suck in the belly to slip through a crack in the ground or an opening or something, are all places where you can have these like funnels. And of course, you can't dodge around the fact of having some kind of encounter, right? Whether it's a natural underworld beast, or hey, thank you very much. Merkster, thank you for joining us. Yeah, whether it's like an underground beast or the PCs are temporarily split because only one person can pass through this opening, and it takes them a little while. And of course, the blind, the the blind lizard me we talked about the other day, are doing their thing, trying to trap the PC. So the idea for you guys know me. I am the self-appointed third pillar-ist. I know today isn't Thursday, but I have to point this out here that using the environment to just make something exciting and dramatic and ramp up that tension, I think is underutilized, and I think we can really have fun with it, even in just small parts. So one other thing we talked about the other day were a little bit of when it comes to monsters things. We kind of start to flow into the more sentient creatures where we're talking about like psychic creatures. We love ourselves some mind flayers. They are the epitome of of um, of the masters of what they do. Whether they are like mind controllers and stuff, beholders or another one, monsters, master race type things. But we can play. I love playing with the middle ground guys, the lieutenants, the the group of creatures and monsters and characters that are like hovering there in the middle, and they're all jockeying for their own position of power even before the player characters get involved in it. And I love playing with that because you can really have fun with playing pulling on factions and finding allies and enemies at the exact same time and working together and such. Uh-oh, Mercs were saying, mentioning in the chat, like also, dude, my first characters were always, always the blue line graph paper back in the 80s. Yep, always on that stuff. I loved it. And the idea that we can make these dramatic areas in our subterranean realms equally what they have on the surface. And this is where we start to leave from what our real world subterranean world is into the gaming universe's Underdark. Now, of course, the Underdark has a vast history, part of the Forgotten Realms. It's got its own things, but in your own setting, you can establish what kinds of cultures there are beneath the surface. And again, I use a term called turning the volume up or turning it to 11, where we can take small things like, for example, have you guys ever gone on like to vacation or going to a small store and they sell those geodes that are like broken open and placed on shelves? And a lot of times they'll have like a amethyst kind of chiseled color to them, scintillating and such. And you could buy them. Sometimes they'll glue them onto a base, or you can find them solid and you can crack them open and such. Imagine a realm like that, or a big vast room, or even a community that lives inside of one that's hundreds of feet, thousands, even miles or kilometers large. For me, I imagine things like that. I imagine, instead of just having a gold mine or a copper mine or something, there's so many minerals under earth that a community can mine for. Basic things like salt, or I don't know, tin, and what's the stuff you soak your feet in? Epsom salts, chalk. There are other things that we can find in the ground, even liquids, finding aquifers or oils, exposing deeply settled gases that could escape either for lethal reasons or to be cultivated by the communities down there. There's so many things that we can use, just pull from in our own real world experiences, and just use them as little touchstones, little elements to add into the game, where we're not rehashing the same cliches over and over again. And it might be something different. A dwarven community that's mining salts deep down in the earth, and the salts can be used for anything from adding it to your food to purify. To salting meats and things so that you can you can cure them so that you can have them for long periods of time. They could be used dealing with those salts on the surface of the earth for a long time. A sack of salt was a method of currency, and so we can pull off some of those small little things and use them in our games. Um, thanks, Merksters. He's so excited. I just got it on Steam sale. Oh yeah, I saw you talking about that. I'm glad you're going to be part of it. Scott Poe says, that geo chamber sounds delicious for some Zorn. You know, I I thought about that too. For those who don't know, there is a Dungeons and Dragons creature known as the Zorn. Passes. It's a uh, semi-sentient creature that passes through things from the elemental plane of Earth and loves itself some gemstone. And could I could imagine maybe even these Zorn creatures would use a big giant geo chamber as maybe like a birthing chamber or something, or maybe it's like catnip for them. They just get really excited when they find one and just start eating pieces off the walls, and or maybe they get like really earth earth elementally related bloated by eating the pieces off the walls and such. But yeah, why not? Why wouldn't there be? Uh, oh, the Zorn. I believe the image I have of the Zorn is like um like an orb, a rough orb with a mouth at the top, and then a couple of arm stalks, like three arm stalks coming off the top of it, and then like three legs on the bottom of it or something. Very similar to a Atiag that likes to eat, you know, human waste, but or yeah, humanoid waste or something. But I believe that's what how I remember it. Um, oh man. But so anyway, Rickard says you could do something like Nika Crystal Cave, not only instantly lethal. I'm not familiar with that cave. Give me a little background on that if you don't mind. But yeah. Uh, yeah, the, I definitely agree with that. If fa- I definitely, yeah. Fat Ninja is giving me some information. Yeah, he's talking. We were just especially you guys in the chat too, reminiscing about the the blue line character sheets and the maps and stuff. Yeah, I remember those so fondly. For those of you that didn't start playing the game until the 90s, you guys don't remember that period of time, but if you take a look just at some images at those old modules, you would see that they were white with blue lines, and even they even had some blue artwork with them. And part of that was to keep that was back in the day where we would scramble to find places like a Kinko's or Office Max or Staples or something and go photocopy the heck out of all the maps and the handouts and such. And that was to keep us from copying all that material. Now, over time, of course, everything's digital now, and the the theft wasn't as important as getting the product into people's hands. But those were things back in the day, man. Um, yeah, those were always great. And we're here talking about the Zorn and other creatures. If you guys don't know, you can definitely look this up on YouTube. There are many conversations with the original progenitors of Dungeons and Dragons that a lot of those creatures were actually toys they purchased from Japan, little small toys, very cheap. And when they wanted to come up with creatures, they would just find a random toy, give it a name, give it some abilities, and throw it into Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I don't know if the Zorn specifically was one of those, but the Boule, the land shark, was one. The rust monster was one of them that they talk about. So yeah, that was that was a thing. Oh man, Scott Poe's like, do you mean gelatinous cube? Uh, being square. Those were. Gaxian creatures you guys are talking about. Gaxian creatures are like the mimic, the gelatinous cube, the earworm, the rot grub, kind of. Those were those kinds of creatures that, for some reason, only existed in a world where there were enough adventurers for them to actually um, have an ecology centered around adventurers down in the dark dungeons and such. Because there's no real reason for a mimic to look like a chest of gold unless there's enough people going into dungeons trying to open up chests of gold for them to eat it, right? So it's kind of fun, and those we really don't see Gaxian creatures as much as we used to, but yeah, those are some fun times. And I don't know. I think we could still get away with that today. I think we could. It would be hilarious to do it, and I know there might be some players that might balk at that quite a bit, but I think we could still do it. So anyway, getting back, because something else that we do like to do on this channel is get squirreled. If you're not get off topic. So we're still talking about the Underdark and some things that I've thought about simply because I am a contributing writer to Critical Hit, and one of the books that will be coming out will be a subterranean book. It won't, of course, we cannot use Underdark; that is trademarked. Well, it might just be called Subterranean, but we might come up with something a little bit more sexy. But part of the idea of being down in the Underdark are like, how do you communicate? How is it that a society is able to sustain itself down underground and still survive? Now, of course, we're talking fantasy, so you don't really need to you don't need to be a scientist to figure these things out. But again, pulling on the threads of how people get their food, how do they communicate with their own members when they are separated in long distances in a subterranean realm, the fact that you have 3 dimensions, so you could have travelers leave their community traveling above or below them, as well as traveling horizontally ish in their realm, and that kind of thing. Rickard says, mind if I repost a dual battleground? No, I don't mind. No, not at all. Yeah. If you guys are both listening to and or watching the YouTube channel and the Discord, I suggest that you pick one or the other. I'm sure you're getting a lot of like reverb or feedback or delay or something like that. Yeah, and I'm hearing from a number of people that Discord's audio doesn't have much buffering and such. Rickard says, Cave of Crystals. Google it. You'll thank me later. Maybe I will. Yeah. Well, that's what the Discord is for as well. In the Discord, guys, you can post pictures, links, that kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely. If you live in a community or you know of a place, if you've gone caving, that's a great opportunity to post those. Yeah, Rickard's saying, which Discord though? Yeah, that is a question. I would suggest not to I would suggest using our Discord for RPG with DBJ. I think that I would probably defer to that. So one of the things, if you guys have ever heard of Tommy knockers, there's of course I believe a story written by Stephen King, and there's a term known as Tommy knockers, and that came about from miners in the past, and there's still people here in the States, up in the mountains of Virginia and West Virginia, that they are still mining for coal down in those deep caves and such. They would take with them children, small children, and they were known as Tommy knockers because they were small, they used less oxygen. And if there was ever a chance of a cave-in, whether they were trapped down below or something, the people trapped could relax and not use as much of their breath. And the young people who were smaller, they could scramble, they would have a little hammer, and they would knock against the walls to either alert for safety or to send a message, and maybe even combined with like a Morse type code so that others could hear them if they were trapped. I'm imagining that there would be communities down in the deep subterranean realms that would have, especially if they're quite organized, that would have a Tommy knocker type idea. The same would go for the idea of taking canaries, birds in a bird cage down with you into the subterranean realm, because there was a chance that miners would hit pockets of deadly gases that would knock them out. They would, if they got trapped, they would know if the oxygen levels were dropping, and things of that nature. So if there was gaseous buildup, if they brought with them, mining hats and torches and lanterns and oils and things, and they would bring chemicals down there with them in the process of them mining, some of that gas would build up, and it was a way for them to alert, because the birds, very tiny, very fragile, very sensitive to changes in air current and such, would die. They would pass out. They wouldn't be tweeting any longer, and that was a way to alert them. So I could imagine a version of that, of using that method everywhere in the subterranean realms. I could imagine, let's go back to our dwarves, right? So the dwarves may have, Mercer's talking canary in the mine. Yeah, absolutely. The canary in the mine, maybe they aren't necessarily canaries. We can come up with another small animal, whether it could be something maybe rodent-like. It could be a flightless little bird, maybe beetles or what have you, something in a glass jar or whatever. You can make up something on the fly as needed, but maybe it's something that's very, very sensitive. A jar of fireflies or something that glows blue, and the colors start to, maybe their colors flare red, and then they die and fall to the bottom of the jar, and they're like, uh-oh, something's about to happen, and they know to stay away from they know to stay away from something. Sorry. Undo says a pixie if you want to be cruel. Oh, I love that. Yeah. If you oh man, you're so wrong, and yet you're so right. That's awesome. I love that idea. You got a little pixie in the cage. The pixie's like, no, please don't take me down there. And the dwarves are like doing their baritone singing and stuff. And the pixie's just like, I could see him just walking around the little cage, all pissed off. Oh man, that's funny. So now, in terms of communication, there's another thing as well where, again, this has to do with story. Or maybe the same dwarven community uses chalk or uses their tools to carve emblems into sides of the walls, using like runes or glyphs or simple messages written in the walls to warn people of danger, to have for themselves a way to lead back to a way for them to lead back to their home, so they aren't lost. There could be one or more members of their little not raiding party, but adventuring party for their community, whose sole purpose is to map their way and recognize all the switchbacks and the dead ends and things like that. And now Shadzar left in a message talking about the Tommy knocker definition. It's saying, not sure where he's getting his info from, but it's basically correcting me. Ghost of a man killed in a mine. The knocker, or the Tommy knocker. They were not children taken into mines in Virginia because they don't take less oxygen than adults. Corrected me on that. For some reason, I remember hearing about the Tommy knocker tradition from when I lived on the East Coast, and someone told me about that. Well, anyway, it goes on to say that it is a mythological creature in Welsh, Cornish, and Devon folklore. The Cornish describe the creature as a little person 2 feet tall with a big head, long arms, wrinkled face, and white whiskers. Maybe someone picked that up from something on when I lived on the East Coast, but that's a thing. Yeah, in the Wikipedia. Yeah, whatever. But the whole point is that it's We are tabletop role play gamers, not necessarily historians. Although, to be honest with you, finding like folklore, like making fun of taking the pixie down into a subterranean mine, are great ways for you uh, to pull in the threads of like the horror elements and the discovery elements, and maybe even of course, every adventuring party with PCs in it are like, hey, I heard rumor about, and and fill in the blanks thereafter, going down deep into dungeons and such. Yeah, Mercer says, yeah, I think they used to keep rats or mice in cages in the caves, and if they start dropping, it was time to run out. And again, what we're talking about here is creating like a pressure or tension generator, because that's what you really want to have in your back pocket as a DM or game master, right? You want to have something that pushes the momentum and the energy forward. If your players now mind you, you don't have to have this as a universal thing in a game where the players are constantly running, but if you really want your players to move, having things that happen where they detect poisonous gases and there's something that the players are carrying in their group that changes. When they hear the rumblings of the earth above them or below them, when they notice the trickling of water and the slight, the soft rock that's almost muddy, and they realize that they're standing underneath a vast subterranean lake and whatnot. Just having those like Merck's was saying, foreboding clues, the foreshadowing of these events that you can always have in your back pocket, that when your players are kind of getting into this 20-minute analysis paralysis, no one's moving forward, no one's going backwards, you're not sure what they want to do. There's a tradition in Hollywood that when all else fails, have someone break in a door and start shooting. Right? It's an action movie trope, right? When things get boring, have someone just start shooting, and that's a silly way of thinking about it. But in essence, it's like, look, when everyone is when everyone's sitting around, like when Mercer says, like, light a fire under their butts, it's like, okay, guys, I get that you're really interested in this, but it's been 20 minutes. We need to keep on moving. As a DM, sometimes it's like, we don't care what you do, just do something. And so to push that energy, to push them and get their asses moving, like Alex C says, yeah, sometimes you need a little threat of a flood, a cave in, choking gases that makes people run away, boulders being pushed over or something like that. I don't know, a horde of subterranean digging worms are digging towards the player characters, doing nothing but just traveling on by. Maybe there's a swarm of beetles that are doing nothing but traveling to another haven with their queen, and just getting them moving and getting along. Yeah, Tesla Ranger says, when players get bored, roll for Wandering Monster. Yeah, exactly. Now that's an old trope that we don't really see that too often any longer. But the Wandering Monster idea was a thing back in the day, where a lot of those modules and adventures had lists of wandering monsters. Now I do understand that there's a misconception about wandering monsters, right? There's this idea that, yeah, Merckx was talking about the rolling boulder from Indiana Jones. Of course. Now, the misconception about wandering monsters is that there is a table of just random wandering monsters that do not fit into your setting, and that's not how it should work. You should really use a wandering monster table, either make up your own or find one that really encapsulates what your setting is about. So, for example, a wandering monster table in your subterranean world should have a list of 6, 10, 20 types of creatures and sentient things and other elements in it that represents your setting. And then when push comes to shove and you don't have any good ideas and you're like, oh man, you sit there with a nice evil grin, and roll on your random table, and these things may happen. Now, mind you, a wandering, it's not necessary for an encounter to be a monster, or a random event doesn't need to be another combat. A random event should be something that changes the aspect of how the players view their actions in the world, right? Uh, you could come upon just a general tribe of people maybe lost in the Underdark, or escaped slaves, or a patch of giant mushrooms, or again, the idea of a swarm of beetles who will more than willingly crawl over top of the player characters, but do no damage. They have no interest in the player characters, right? And that could be its own fear as well, where maybe a guy just tells all the players, like, please don't, just crouch down, cover your head, don't do anything. And all of a sudden these dog-sized beetles start climbing over the PCs, making them feel pretty icky. But again, uh, you know, it may be the thing that might set the players off, and that might be a clue as to how things live down here. Now, Alex C says, since you're in the Underdark, make it an Umber Hulk and have it say, "Oh yeah," as it busts through. Umber Hulks, gelatinous cubes, yeah, those were. Um, Mercer says, I have no experience with it. With the gelatinous cube is the is a proverbial Gaxian creature. Why a living ooze would shape itself into a cube was simply because we had graph paper, and it was fun to have this somewhat nebulous, almost invisible thing sitting in the hallway, a skeleton sitting in the hallway, and the player character thinks it's a skeleton. And of course, they go charging to it and they get stuck inside the gelatinous cube. Cute maybe doesn't fit too much in more of a realistic or gritty type setting, especially if you want to keep the I say ridiculousness out of it. But you could definitely make a gelatinous and then pool of fluid, or dripping from a ceiling, or I don't know, oozes and jellies and puddings or something, corralled by, I don't know, goblin overseers or something with I don't know, rods that can zap them or something like that. Like, I think you could play with the idea and not just get rid of the gelatinous cube. I think a gelatinous cylinder is perfectly fine. Sticking it into a pit or something. Um, oh man. Ah, yeah, no problem. No, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nah, I'm gonna keep on talking here. Now, Rickard, yeah, yeah. Thanks everyone, all the new voices, new faces, I guess, out there. Rickard mentioned was talking about yesterday. He said we talked about mind flayers. You could do a split the battle, having PCs affected by their psychic attack having to play on a different battle map than those affected. So it goes on to say you could probably do this around the table, but I would think it would be easier when using a virtual tabletop. Could be even a lair action of the giant brain. So taking that a little further, I'm imagining where Rickard is going with this, in a sense of physically the players may be, let's say they're in a maze of caverns, and they're being attacked by mind controlled enemies. Let's go back to those blind albino lizard men from the other day, right? But on a mental plane, it's possible that some of the characters are being pulled into a battle on a psychic level that's completely different than the subterranean realm. And I think that would be awesome to have like the wizard and sorcerer of the group are like um not even just passed out, but maybe they're like half distracted because they're fighting on I don't know, a world of chaos or something. It's like the psychic realm where the mind flayers are attacking them. But in the physical world, the mind flayers in that brain could be many, many miles away or deep down in a subterranean realm, but being attacked on a psychic plane. And in a virtual tabletop, you could create this location that only exists within the mind. I could see that. I like that idea. I like the lot, and you could get across a lot of information as well. Um, I'm going reading a little bit in the chat. Mm, mm, James James Dillon McCullough. I'm going to call you Jay. Jay says a good example is the movie Descent. Caves, tunnels, monsters, all below ground. I've heard a lot about the Descent, that it is extremely claustrophobic. Haven't seen it, but I've heard for horror fans, I've heard it's really good. And again, if you get on YouTube and look at people who, some of the craziest people that are not just people who go caving or spelunking, but they go cave diving. They swim in caves. They take scuba gear with them and go in caves, and that is crazy. Crazy, not just dark, but like scary to me. And again, we need to use that in our games. There, believe you me, there's nothing that won't give a adventuring party pause for them to stand at the edge of a pool of water, a dim light down at the bottom of the pool of water, and understand that they have to swim down deep to maybe find an air pocket, to find a distance to get to another area. You're going to have yourselves a bunch of players that are like, I am not doing that at all. You know what I mean? Yeah, I it's sphincter clenching inducing, I think. Very much so. Absolutely. um just Scott Poe's talking about the Underdark is also the place where they banish fell empires, the Drow, the Mind Flayers, the Aboleth. See, and that's where I love the way you worded that, Scott, where you said it's where they banish fell empires. And of course, that also deals with our own real world concept of the fallen, right? We normally look at things above us tend to be of a purer nature. It's above us. It's the sun is shining. I mean, sure, we got storms, but we imagine things with wings of white feathers, just culturally. And then we think of things below us, below a serpent's belly. We think of the darker things that are below us as well: snakes, beetles, worms, um, um, decomposition, the burying of bodies and such. And somehow we relate that to dark things, evil things, and of course, being underground, there's no light as well. So taking that and turning the volume up again, that's where some dark empires go. And could you imagine that in your world, instead of an empire being destroyed, instead it just becomes yet one more layer in the ground beneath us? And maybe in your setting you have a history that's 2, 3, 4 generations of a particular history of different empires, and those empires might exist as a dark version of what they used to be above ground, which I think you could really pull on that, especially when, yeah, Rickard says, sounds like a great idea for a mega dungeon. Yeah, absolutely. Mercer says, yeah, the underground is dark, damp, often lives off of death, such as mushrooms, decomposition. All right, I'm gonna suggest something to you guys and see where you guys take this. Right, so you're going through your forests or your deserts, you're in your big cities and whatnot. You have your adventuring party, and of course, there's lots of undead. You got your skeletons, your zombies, maybe some vampires and such, and you kill them. Okay, imagine, if you will, the dark necrotic energies that make them undead in the first place, but it's decomposing into the earth, but that energy still exists, right? So imagine things like foods like what are they? Are they called tubers? Um, Potatoes, yams, rooted uh, things that dig down deep. Imagine pools of water and earth and dust and all of that. Mercer says, "Yeah, tubers." Imagine all of that seeping down deeper and deeper into the earth, where it's it could be a reason why some of these dark energies and even opinions of not hating even opinions of hating surface dwellers may come from. So could you imagine like uh, zombies or skeletons that are petrified, or um, a, a community of people that for us it might just be poison gas, but they're literally breathing in the dust of bone that's been ground to powder that sits in their lungs. And when they die, they don't just die. Maybe they come back to life as a mindless undead thing, and they have to, kill their loved ones because it's just a natural event. There's no magic specifically involved from some necromancer. It could be that this is just a natural effect of what happens to them. Um, even something such as vampires. Why wouldn't vampires sensitive to the sun? I'm sure there's plenty of vampire lords and their minions going, dude, we're moving down underground. Well, that way we'll never be exposed to sunlight. This is a great place for us to live. Of course, we're going to need some slaves and some feeding stock, but whatever. We'll find that. Um, yeah, I just imagine that the side effect of society above on the surface world could really dramatically affect the lives of those underneath. Um, I mean, and again, that's just pulling on certain threads, right? The innocent dwarven villagers that are going around picking tubers out of the ceiling, because they're pulling the roots and the yams and such, the radishes from above their heads. Maybe they find something diseased, and they run back to their homes and havens and such. And uh, we're not even talking about the depths of the subterranean world. Our own real world, we have certain layers of earth. So you could have yourselves encounters with creatures that are semi-subterranean. Uh, Again, dwarves, gnomes, um, many of your giants and ogres and such. Maybe some of them are semi-subterranean. They live in caves. They live underground sometimes, but they come above. Whereas there might be layers of territory where, sure, the ogre lives in his own caves and caverns that may exist a couple hundred feet underground, but maybe there's a territory that the ogre just will not go below because there's something even more dangerous below them. And those territorial fights might be something vast. So, for example, in your setting, maybe there's the core of your world, whether it's like an earth orb or maybe it's just a flat plane. Maybe that's where creatures from the plane of fire and earth and shadow um, are able to come into our world, and the only thing keeping them from getting to the surface is just distance, the difficulty of getting there, the idea that maybe the one day that the fire and earth and shadow are able to work together, they're able to get to the surface, but they're always at odds with each other. I believe that's a Morden Canaan idea. Um, uh, the blood war amongst the fiends and in the outer planes, that they're to keep them fighting each other before they organize and take over and such. Um, Merkster says, I mean, in some large metro areas, there are actual groups of homeless people who actually live in the sewers. Yeah, absolutely. There are plenty of that. I'm going to describe to you something pretty dark and kind of nasty, but it actually makes sense here in central Columbus. Rickard says, given that some treat the Underdark as a separate plane, what if the necrotic energy seeps back down, and when enough have pulled together, new monsters spawns from the gathered energy? treating it kind of like how demons and devils go back down to their planes when killed. I see. I like that idea. I like that a lot. As a matter of fact, I could imagine there would be like traveling, um, I guess, surveyors looking for these pockets of energy, maybe to harness it. Well, both harness and or corral it off so that it doesn't spread. So there could be one group. I'm sure you're going to have yourself some drow, some mind flayers, some Dwygar, however they're pronounced, traveling around trying to look for these pockets of necrotic energy that's seeping down into the earth. Whereas I'm sure there are going to be other groups that are going, look, we've got to figure out a way to, I don't know, insert some kind of radiant energy to disperse it or block it off or something. Scott Post says, fear finding an aboleth city. Ooh, could you imagine? And the PCs have a map to a vast underground city, and they go past so many obstacles to get there. And when they get there, they find out that the place is flooded, and all they see in the deep shadows of this vast aquatic city down under the earth are just tentacles, um, leaving little trails behind them as they slip behind buildings and whatnot. But that would be I think that would make a great adventure, to have a half submerged subterranean city where the characters can see the streets and the steps and the buildings and the balconies and such, but some of it is half collapsed. There are streets that are just completely filled with water. There are basements that he can go into. There are multi-level buildings and walkways that go over top of the water. And maybe in one corner of this vast subterranean city, there's a giant waterfall. And that waterfall is not natural. It somehow, some way, an aquifer has broken forth, and the city is slowly flooding. And there's a chance that that giant lake or under realm ocean might bust through any moment while the PCs are down there discovering what's going on. That would be very, very interesting. Oh man. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Hey, I'm hearing you, you oh, let's see if, yes, absolutely. Yeah. 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 Fat Ninjas telling me about just the 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 psychological harm, the horror of it. And I think if you really want to, maybe you might want to take your game in a different direction or something. I think that's a great idea because, well, first of all, fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons, you turn to your madness tables, right? There's a chance that the not just having physical obstacles, but mental obstacles as well. A lot of those creatures themselves drive people mad, and you could have this again, this powder keg of the PCs slowly being driven to not just insanity, but that panic, that despair, the idea that they're trapped in this place and being surrounded by things that don't think in normal human terms. And I love that idea. I love the idea of using madness and despair and horror and such. A, a a very physical character could be threatened on their psychologically, and what a great way to challenge your players from a different point of view. I often bring up the fact that if the only way to solve a problem is to do damage to it, then the only people who have success and will find fun are those who cause damage. But if you have a way of solving a situation, driving through something that causes madness, that's a nightmare uh, image from the deep and dark. I could imagine that maybe your paladins, barbarians dealing out the most damage may not be able to fight this thing. It takes more than just maybe it takes more than courage or just confronting their own fears or something. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Rickard says, I'm sorry. Dead Man, the storyteller, brings up the Dwargar, the dwarves of no pronounceable name. Yeah, yeah. Rickard says basically just dwarves in Old Norse. Scott Post says he also has tons of permanent charmed water breathing slaves. That's the aboleths, man. I'm sure they have a bunch of permanently charmed, kind of lobotomized things working for them, living down in this maybe empire or something. Rickard says, ouch, the Mind Flayer psychic attacks, dealing no damage, but removes a memory from the PC and heals the Mind Flayer. The PC remembers what they lost but cannot recall it. I like that idea. I like that a lot. Trading their memories for survival, even possibly. Ooh, or the psychic attackers living off of the memories of the adventurers that come down there, only to use those memories to, because they're alien, they're building a mental landscape of where they want to be. So they have no they could be brilliant, but they don't understand what humanity is. So they're just using everyone's memories a little bit to build this almost like a map of how they would take over the surface world or something. That would be awesome. Yeah. Wow. Scott Post says, oh, almost forgot. They can also read your mind and get your heart's desires and create powerful adventures. Oh boy. Yeah. The idea of being mentally being attacked by giving you your heart's desire. That's an old, yes, animated. There was an animated version of this, and that was based on the comic book version of it involves Superman. I believe it was something simple like happy birthday or surprise present or something. It's a set of had a simple name like that, where one of Superman's enemies gives him this present, and it's this flower that surrounds you, and then you go into a dream world where you're giving your heart's desire. But of course, if you go into that heart's desire, you'll never return. Yeah. Infinite Roleplay says that which exists in the mind cannot be slashed, smashed, or bashed. I like that idea. But absolutely. And who's to say that the big bad, to defeat the big bad, is of course maybe there's a brain down there or a giant glowing orb or something, and it's not a matter of drawing your sword and slashing it, but going into a dream realm where you confront the nightmares in your own mind or something. I like that. It'd be gamifying that. You're going to have some buy-in from your players, but I definitely imagine that. So Alex C says, if I end up with a tongue tie, I just say gray dwarves or deep dwarves. Yeah, me too. I don't bother with what's the other one? Come on, guys. Sverf Neblin? Sverf Neblin? That's another crazy. Yeah, I know. And supposedly I think WotC put out a pronunciation guide, which I'm thinking like, don't do that. Don't put up. I think us just having fun trying to pronounce those darn things. I think it's just it's fun unto itself. Yeah. Oh, so funny. Yeah. Yeah. Getting back over here to Discord, Lady Shell, hey, what's going on there? Yeah, I think half the fun of the legacy of Dungeons and Dragons is just our ability to argue over the proper pronunciation of things that don't exist anyway. Yeah, Infinite Roleplay says the boule. Yep, absolutely. The land shark, the bullet. Yeah, it was the boule. Alexi says, I just say Smurf and then Neblin. But I think part of that is our legacy. So we've come upon the hour mark. Had a little fits and starts. I'm going to kind of get used to this. But I just want to let everyone know, both in YouTube and at Fantasy Grounds College, that I go live 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is my time. So for those in Fantasy Grounds, that is UTC -4. I do this Monday through Friday. And I'm hoping to be able to do this. I'll be far more than willing to do this Monday through Friday. At both, I'm finding that people are finding the voice, the Discord audio is better and more responsive than YouTube. But whatever the case may be, we do this for about an hour. I go live at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is my time, or UTC time, which is -4, Monday through Friday. We usually pick a theme. Sometimes someone in the chat will come up with a theme to talk about, and that theme will be all week long. So it might be swamps. It might be, I don't know, fiends. It might be angels. It could be stunt work or something. Anything that's everything related to tabletop RPGs. And then each day we get distracted quite a bit. We kind of get ourselves a little. We see a squirrel somewhere, but for the most part, each day has a different. We focus on a different subject of that theme. So, for example, we have Monster Monday. Apparently this is going to be Discord Tuesday. That might change if we actually, if this is going to be simulcast each day. But then we have World Building Wednesday, Third Pillar Thursday, my passion. You guys will find out what Third Pillar Thursday is about when we get there. And then Future Friday. So I am DBJ. I am a contributing writer to Critical Hit Publishing. We have a number of things on Drive Through RPG. My little brainchild is the cinematic environs that are produced for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. The other individuals that are part of Critical Hit Publishing, those cinematic environs are also made for Call of Cthulhu, and there's so many other things. Guys, thank you very much for participating and dealing with the little fits and trips and starts and such. That is, babe. Yep, she's off to work. Love you. So the fits, trips, and starts, we'll even it out here in a bit. But guys, thank you very much for having to go. And Alex, thank you for joining me. Everybody, Infinite guys, again, live stream on YouTube, and we are also doing this. I suggest that you go over to join Fantasy Grounds College and join their Discord, or if you already have a Discord account, just go over to Fantasy Grounds College, and we're also broadcasting this audio as well there, if you prefer one over the other, or you just want to listen in. And it's far easier for you to do that through Discord than it is for YouTube. So guys, everyone, have a great one. Catch everyone tomorrow. I will be in the Discord for another 5 minutes or so over at Fantasy Grounds when I end the stream. So if you want to send a message or talk or say something like that, whatever. Anyway, guys, have a great one. I will see thee tomorrow. All right, now.